All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode number 58 of Collectible Live. The intro didn't seem to work, but that's okay. Today is Monday, January the 16th, 2023. My name is Jeremy Lee. I would like to thank everyone who tuned in last time with our guest, Matthew Cyrulnik, for what was really an amazing discussion about the eye appeal of sports cards and really buying the card and not the holder. But we are going to get to today's episode. So let's bring out our guest. He is the CEO of Collectable, Ezra Levine. Welcome to Collectible Live. And how are you today?
I'm great. Thanks for having me on. I think it's been about 2 months since we last spoke. So a lot's happened since then. So we're excited to talk.
All right. Yes, sir. We are. Lots of news coming out of Collectible in the last week. And I'm excited to learn more about it and how it works. So listen, let's dive right in and let's start off with this. So in the press release that was released this past week, the press release discussed the matter around the BWIC, the bids wanted in competition, new model that Collectible is offering and introducing on its platform. We are going to get into, and let me just say to the audience right off the bat here, I'm sure there's going to be lots of questions on how this works. So we are going to get through them the first part of the episode, and maybe we may hold some of the questions that come in through the chat till the end for anything that wasn't answered, but please be patient as we do get to these. But Ezra, I'm curious if we could just jump right in with really what was the motivation behind the BWIC, the bids wanted in competition innovation for Collectible?
Yeah. I mean, look, one thing Collectibles always tried to do since day one was really advance the hobby forward, to grow the hobby, and to innovate, right? I mean, there's a lot of amazing companies, a lot of amazing entrepreneurs, and people have been doing this for a long time, right? So we never want to do something that's already been done, right? We always try to move the industry forward and to grow it as best we can. So this is a new process, a new competitive bidding process for the collectibles market. Certainly not a new process for the financial markets, right? So it's called bids wanted in competition. It is a competitive bidding process. Again, tried and true over the financial markets for decades. They transact billions of dollars of pretty esoteric financial instruments this way. And we thought it was a really interesting application for the collectibles market. There's really also interesting implications for fractional investors on Collectible. I'm sure we'll talk about that. But really, it's our continued expansion of the platform to be able to take in new members, to be able to showcase different ways that people can utilize fractional ownership to really advance the collectibles industry forward, to advance collectibles as an alternative asset. And, we're just really excited for this to get going.
All right. So thank you for the context on it. And I guess, I read the press release and I come away with questions because I don't necessarily understand all the financial jargon that we're taking from the traditional financial markets and now applying them to collectibles. So can we've talked about BWIC, it's bids wanted in competition, but I appreciate the innovation and I appreciate the exploration that you're undertaking to find new ways to stimulate the market, to increase the liquidity. You mentioned in the press release price discovery. There's so much sort of really things that sound great about it. But my biggest question is, how does this process work from start to finish? Like, can you get right into the weeds of this thing? What is it going to look like for people? They come onto the website. The first offer. When is the first BWIC pool or grouping of assets going to be offered? And what's going to happen when I go to the website that day? Take us through the whole process, if you can, please.
So the first bids wanted in competition will be Sunday night, starting next Sunday. There's actually, if you go onto the Collectible website or the app, there's a pretty big countdown clock, a countdown timer that stares you right in the face. So every time I go on, it gives me a lot of excitement, a lot of anxiety. It's a new product launch for Collectible. I'm getting the same reminiscences that I did when we first launched Fractional. Very, very exciting. So the first one's going to be next Sunday night. Starts at 8 p.m. and the whole thing is a 7-day process, start to finish, 7 days. So over in a week. My job here is to try to take what could seem like a complicated process and make it pretty simple. And I actually do think it is very simple. When people hear it and they'll understand it, and I'm sure when people see it in motion, they'll get it even more. The easiest way to really explain it is it has a lot of characteristics of an auction, right? So people, I'm sure in the collectibles industry, are very familiar with auctions, right? So think of a 7-day auction, right? There's two parts of the 7-day auction: the first 5 days, which is called the qualifying rounds, and then the final 2 days, which is the final round. You can kind of think of the final round almost like extended bidding, right? So again, to recap, 7 days all in. The first round is 5 days, and the second round is 2 days, right? So within the first 5 days, you'll go on the Collectible platform, whether the app or the mobile. You'll see very curated, iconic collectible assets. So for the first one, it's around 25 assets. We're expecting the total value to be somewhere around the $7 to $8 million mark of those 25 assets. So really, sort of high-end curated material. And you'll be able to place bids, right? So it'll look pretty similar to a traditional auction house. Here's the caveat. You can bid in two different ways. You can either bid as an individual, right, on a single lot or multiple lots, just like you would any other auction, or you could bid as part of a group, as part of a fractional group, right? So there are two different ways to bid on individual lots within it. After the first 5 days, right, the top 3 bids and only the top 3 bids advance to the final round. So everyone in the first 5 days by the way, anyone in the first 5 days is only allowed one bid. So you can't submit multiple bids. You get one bid and one bid only. This incentivizes people to bid competitively. If you're not in the top 3, you do not have a shot to own the asset individually. So you get one bid, has to be competitive because you need to advance to the next round to be able to own it. From there, the top 3 bids again are selected, and you move on to essentially the championship round, right, into the playoffs, into the extended bidding. If you do not advance, that doesn't mean that you're out of the asset altogether. Again, you could drop down to a group bid. So you can join other collectors, other investors, whatever you want to call yourselves, into a group bid. So you still have a chance to win the asset, just not individually. At the end of the 5 days, right? So now we move on to the final round. Again, just the top 3 individual bids get one more bid, one more best and final. So come with your best offer, come with the heat, and the best offer individually is presented to the seller. At the same time, there's the group bid. So we essentially aggregate how many people are willing to buy it fractionally, and that essentially competes against the individual bid. Best offer wins, and the seller will ultimately have the chance to sell the asset for whatever they perceive to be the best offer between the individual bid or the fractional bid.
So would there be any reason for the owner to take a lower bid? Like if the fractional bid or the group bid is lower than the individual people's bids at that final stage of the bidding competition, why would the owner take the lower bid? You made it sound like they might.
Yeah, well, one great thing about fractional, which a lot of people love, is the ability to retain equity in your asset, right? So we have a lot of consignors who say, hey, look, I love a little liquidity, right? But I believe in the upside. I believe that this is a core holding. I believe this is a prized possession. I believe this has upside. So they can say, hey, look, I want to retain some equity in this asset. So maybe they get a little bit less on the valuation side, but they have more upside to come. So that's one core reason why someone might elect the fractional bid if it's lower than the individual bid.
One thing that thank you for that. Something that's a great explanation, by the way, makes sense. One of the things that I like about this group bidding piece is that it seems like this bids wanted in competition. I keep saying it just so people understand. BWIC, bids wanted in competition. It almost formalizes what might be going on, or what could potentially be going out there in the wild of the hobby amongst all the auction houses, is that people might be doing this less formally already or informally already. There might be a few people that say, hey, this LeBron James RPA is going up on PWCC next week. Well, hey, you want to, let's all take a third of it and let's buy it that way. Now it's different because there's no competition against them. It's they win it. Well, there is, they win it or they don't. So it's just a simple bidding process. But do you ever look at it like that this is maybe gonna, like, could this scale into something that happens more and more, where someone might say to you, hey guys, we love the model and the system that you've implemented here, but we want to go after more items than you're offering. You're only offering 25 this week. We want to go, we like this over there and that over there. somebody could knock this off, or you could do it yourselves? What are your thoughts on that?
Great question. And it's definitely something we thought through. So this we're calling it group bidding, right? It's the ability to buy assets with other people, right? We're calling this group bidding. So we're really formally rolling out on items on Collectable first. But shortly after, we're planning on launching this for any marketplace on any, essentially any vertical, any collectible item, theoretically could be group bid on, right? So we'll be making some announcements probably shortly on the formal rollout of group bidding. I think there's been one thing that I've been saying, for the last couple months, which is I think the days of fractional being siloed onto a fractional ownership platform like Collectable are not long, right? I think fractional will be really extended to be able to participate again in multiple different auction houses, multiple different marketplaces. The application is there, the technology is there, the regulatory process is there. That's really what Collectible specializes in. So yeah, I mean, our vision, this is really what we're building towards, is essentially any asset, any auction house can have a regulated and formalized way for people to band together and buy assets, whether that's anonymously with other collectors on Collectable, which is essentially what fractional ownership is, right? You're buying into an asset. You don't necessarily know exactly who else is in on that asset, or you could do it as part of a private group. So Jeremy, you might invite 5 of your closest friends, your family, whomever, right? Who all have a shared love of a certain asset and really want to own it together, right? So this is really a formalization of exactly what you're saying, which is people already doing this, right? Just the same way people already doing fractional before we launched fractional, right? There's, that famous story of Gretzky, right? With the Hannes Wagner card, with Gretzky and the owner of the LA Kings, they fractionally bought, Hannes Wagner card. They, multiple people bought it and they owned it together, right? That's fractional ownership really in a nutshell. It wasn't done in a regulated, formalized process, but it was being done, right? So our view is that, yeah, I mean, this is something that happens all the time. People buy cards or any kind of collectible together, but there's no real way to kind of formalize that unless people do all the legal work and the custodianship, and then where do you keep it, and what if one person wants to sell, but multiple. There's a ton of pain points with it. We're bringing, sort of a formalized, regulated structure to it.
Okay. When you mentioned how, you can invite your family and that, it made me think of an analogy, and this is probably loose, but it had me smirking, which is somebody goes to a golf club to play golf. They might take their 3 family members with them, and now they know who they're going to go golfing with. They've got their group of 4, but they might not have anyone that wants to go with them. So instead they'll go to the golf course, they'll go to the club themselves, and they'll be randomly put with 3 people they may or may not have ever known, and they'll go golfing together that way. That's kind of the anonymous side of it. I don't know, probably silly, but that popped into my mind.
It's not so. Actually, if you want to know the inside baseball, how group bidding really came about was fantasy sports. Right. So
really?
we a very similar model to, I don't know if anyone who's watching this is the commissioner of their fantasy football league, right? But when you create a fantasy league, you essentially can join it in 2 ways. You can create your own private group, and one person becomes a commissioner, and they essentially can invite other people to join the private league. Or they can join a public league, maybe facilitated by ESPN or Yahoo or whoever your fantasy sports provider is, where you're competing against random people on that site. But so think of it very similar to that, right? You can bid together as part of a private group where one person's the commissioner, or you could bid with other collectors who happen to have a shared interest, right? You might not know them all personally. I think that'd be actually kind of cool if we did, shareholder summits or, something to really connect the people who clearly have a shared passion, a shared love of collectibles. But so that actually, if you want to know that the real sort of inspiration behind this, it actually was fantasy sports.
Oh, that's pretty cool. It all comes full circle is when we say that sports are part of the motivation. All right. Before I get to my next question, let's just say hello. We got the Loud Collector joining us. Giddy up. What's going on? Jake Dahl is with us. Mod Cult is with us. MLW. Hello to you as well. Baseball Card Curmudgeon. That's Julian. What's going on? LinkedIn user. This is the people at Piece of the Game. It's a great discovery tool for hard to price rare assets. So they seem to understand what BWIC is all about. And Junk Wax Museum says no better show to listen to, especially when uploading to the old eBay. Very nice. All right. So my next question is really, you have some Wall Street experience as a finance professional. And I'm assuming that it's that experience that made you aware of the BWIC model in the first place. Why do you think it's going to work for collectibles?
Yeah, a great question, right? I think, one risk we have with naming it bids wanted in competition is that it sounds financial, right? And I think a lot of people, when they hear something financial in nature, their brains immediately turn off. You're right. I mean, I and a couple of members of the team, do have Wall Street experience, and we are familiar with actually participating and trading some of these BWICs, and we saw that it works, right? It's really a great way to run a formalized process to take in bids, right? I mean, you could think of anything that happens in the collectible market, right? People are bidding on stuff all the time, right? Whether they're a public auction or maybe you're putting in a bid for something on buy it now. I mean, everyone who's a collector is familiar with some sort of competitive bidding process, right? This is kind of no different in a lot of ways, right? You're putting in a bid for a collectible asset. One reason why we think it's perfect is, like a lot of the types of assets that trade through BWICs in the public markets, sometimes in collectibles, there's no obvious market clearing price, particularly, on, as mentioned before, on rare pieces, one-of-ones, rare pieces, items that haven't sold, maybe ever, haven't sold in 10 years, right? I mean, there's just a lot of these pieces that collectibles involved, and you can look at, a list of 25 amazing assets, again, representing, somewhere between $7 to $8 million worth of stuff. A lot of these pieces, there's no obvious market clearing price. Take a 52 Bowman SGC 10, right? I mean, how many times does that trade, right? And again, you can go down the list of the items that we have. So, it's really a way to kind of do a formalized process for people to submit their best offers to have a chance to win the asset, right? And ultimately, our view here is that, look, I mean, this is, a difficult time in a lot of markets, not just the collectible markets at the high end, right? But, we want to create a process where sellers want to bring great assets to the market in a way that was price protected, discreet, and really facilitated a true competitive bidding process. Oftentimes people want to see, what they could get for the asset, and then ultimately, sort of decide once they know what they could sell it for to either sell it or not sell it. When you do an auction, you're sort of pot committed, right? You either sell it. If you don't have a reserve, you sell it. You take a pretty substantial binary risk, and that's great for a lot of assets. But I'm sure you talk to a lot of collectors. I talk to a lot of collectors. A lot of people, there are a lot of assets. They are just not auction assets, right? They just don't want to take that binary risk. Of course, you can mitigate risk in the auctions by using a reserve price, but I think a lot of people know that using a reserve price at auction kind of doesn't work the way it's intended to work, right? Oftentimes, putting a reserve price at auction, it sort of acts as the ceiling, not the floor, if you know what I mean, right? And that really is not necessarily how we think it should work, right? So it's a way for people to bring great assets to the market, see what they're worth, and ultimately, if they get bids that are worth transacting, they can transact, right? But there's no asset impairment if a bid doesn't come above your reserve price. And so we're excited. We think this is going to bring a lot of great assets to the table to really see what the assets are worth and to ultimately give a chance for liquidity for assets that really are not good auction assets.
Great. No, appreciate that. How do you see the sort of the interactivity between the BWIC model that's launching on Collectible and the traditional fractional model that's already on Collectible? How are these going to interface with each other?
Yeah, no, great question. So in a lot of ways, one is we are acutely aware of the need and the want for more liquidity on the fractional side. One thing that we study closely is the price at which assets are trading on the fractional markets relative to comparable sales at auction. And the data is rather interesting. I mean, there's a lot of examples, again, not securities advice of any kind, but there's a lot of examples of assets that are trading well below recent auction sales on very similar, if not identical assets, right? So this is a way for us to really kind of help realize some of those valuation gaps, right? To help create a catalyst for shareholders that even if, for whatever reason, the secondary markets of fractional aren't kind of doing what they're supposed to do, for lack of a better term, that we want shareholders to know that we're going to take action, right? That we're going to essentially take, a shareholder catalyst, right? In the public markets, you can do this all the time, right? Not individuals, but you can go activist on a company, right? Shareholders who are not pleased with the way a stock is trading can essentially go activist, right, and try to affect change, right, or to close the valuation gap. Think of BWIC and this competitive bidding process as a way for Collectible and shareholders together to help close some of these valuation gaps and to create additional liquidity for the market. So in fractional, you're gonna have a lot of liquidity, right? You get liquidity every day, right, from 9:30 to 4 o'clock, 5 days a week, true stock market hours. You get liquidity there if you want, if there's liquidity to be had. But at least once a year, every asset on Collectible will be eligible to be put up for a competitive bidding process, right? So, we believe that this is going to be a pretty interesting catalyst for the fractional space, for people to know that, hey, look, at least once a year, every asset will be eligible for a competitive bidding process, whereby, we might get competitive offers that shareholders ultimately elect to sell, and they'll get paid out that way, right? We do a lot of buyout offers. Collectible, has over 50 buyout offers, I think 28 of which have been sold, average return above IPO price somewhere in the 55% range. Right? So this is another way that Collectible can bring additional shareholder catalyst to the market. So that's one. Two is we look at BWIC and really, I would say by extension, group bidding, right? So again, just to recap, group bidding is the ability for a group of people fractionally to buy an asset or bid on an asset together, right? We look at this almost as the next application of fractional, right? So we think of what fractional has been to date, right? Fractional has been Collectible and the consignor mutually negotiate a price. Then we essentially market the asset at that price, and we need to get people to buy in at that price, right? This has worked. I mean, no doubt it's worked. We've done 55 million or whatever it is in completed transactions, and we have a lot of great case studies. But I think people are also aware that sometimes picking a price is very difficult on these collectible assets, right? Again, oftentimes no obvious market clearing price, especially when things are one-of-a-kind assets or haven't traded in a long time. So this process really is a way for us to kind of invert it. As opposed to Collectible picking a price, the market is now picking a price, right? So if enough people agree on a valuation and they can raise enough money to compete against individual bidders, it wins, right? So it's really, I think of it as a little David versus Goliath, a little fractional versus individual, and I think it'll be pretty fun.
Okay, lots there to chew on. Seems to me like, under the existing collectible model, which is just, fractional IPOs and then sitting back and waiting for buyout offers to come. That's one thing that how this increases the liquidity, is that we don't need to sit there and wait for an offer to come that might not come in for 1 or 2 years or longer. We are going to have the ability to offer up each asset that's on the Collectible platform under the BWIC model once a year, so that there is the ability for the liquidity of the asset by the shareholders, and also the price discovery. Whereas, if the bidder, number one, an asset may now achieve a higher price than the most recent trade extrapolated would indicate, because there's someone out there who may want to purchase it, or a group of people who may want to purchase it. But it also allows them to say, hey, that's not enough. We're going to reject the sale and continue to hold it. But now they might know that, that might be what it's worth, because this went through a very formal BWIC process. So if they reject it, then what I'm thinking might happen, and you can jump in here, is that maybe at that point a buyout offer comes for, because let's say the most competitive BWIC offer is $1 million, but the shareholders on Collectible want 1.25 million for it, and then somebody who put in their most competitive bid didn't get as competitive as they really could have, and they say, well, okay, they didn't take the million through BWIC, I'm going to come back with a buyout offer the old way on Collectible at, say, 1.25. Can that situation happen?
Yeah. So again, we'll put these things to a competitive bidding process. We'll take shareholder input in terms of where they would be selling it. So think of what happens when Collectible gets a normal buyout, right? All shareholders get a survey from us via text message or via email, and they essentially elect, do you want to sell it at a designated price or not, right? And then Collectible essentially aggregates that data pro rata, and we ultimately accept it or not on behalf of shareholders. We're doing a similar process here where shareholders can, before the bids wanted and competition process begins, can indicate the collectible, do you want to sell it? And if you do want to sell it, at what price would you be a willing seller? Collectible then will aggregate that data and essentially will use that as essentially a silent reserve price. In this process, important to note, we're not using the term reserve, we're using the term context, right? So a context price is a reserve price. A reserve price is a context price. So just for everyone's sort of terminology here, context price is really a reserve price. So yeah, we are taking shareholder input. We'll very much be guided by shareholder input. That's something we've always done consistently, and it's exciting. But yeah, I mean, if that context price, aka the reserve price, is not hit, the asset will resume trading on Collectible, and bids are always wanted, right? Shareholders can always get buyout offers. So we think between the secondary market liquidity, between the sort of structured BWIC process, shareholders knowing that at least once per year these assets will go for a formal bidding process, and the ability to also get a buyout offer essentially at any time, that the liquidity profile of fractional offerings will increase dramatically.
So you mentioned that the group bidding piece, well, there's a lot of anonymity with who's bidding and what, who's in the group that might be bidding, what individuals are bidding. And I know that, the bidding process on pretty much all auction platforms are anonymous, but what sort of assurance does the market have that, or transparency will be offered, so to ensure that they're, no matter what you do, someone might call funny business on things, right? So I'm sure you guys are smart over there. I'm sure you've already thought about this. How can we be confident that everything going on is above board and they're under the anonymity of the bidding in the group?
Yeah, no, great question there, right? So, for one, I mean, a lot of the people who are already, sort of eligible to bid, Collectible has over 100,000 users who've gone through a formal KYC AML process. So we probably know more, about our bidders than most auction houses do, right? So that helps just in terms of sort of bidder verification. The other is, look, I mean, we are an SEC regulated business, right? We're an SEC regulated platform, and so we take every precaution we can, right? So we're very acutely aware of this, and we've always prioritized, sort of the integrity of our platform. So yeah, I mean, the process is designed to purposely not publicize what bids come in and how many bids come in. Again, you could be bidding against 1,000 people, or you could be bidding against one person, right? Everything is purposely concealed, and we think that will lead to better discovery of a true market clearing price and more integrity of the bidding process overall.
All right, no, great stuff. There was a question that came in from a follower on, I believe, Twitter, Train74, wanted to know, what is the thought process in selecting the assets for the BWIC platform? Why are some chosen and not others? Is there a criteria you are using? Is it random? What's that process like? Yeah,
again, every asset on Collectible will be eligible for it, right? So it's a first one. We're starting off small, with just 3, but in every subsequent BWIC, there will be shareholder assets included. So I would encourage you to kind of stay tuned. You'll probably be receiving communications for us shortly for the next BWIC process. But again, every asset on Collectible will be eligible for the BWIC process.
So it might just be random which ones are which week.
Correct. Yep. And again, if there are ones that are particularly, sort of ripe for a particular time, maybe seasonality, maybe, football cards get hot in advance of the season. I mean, we'll definitely look at things like that. But yeah, I mean, ultimately every asset will be eligible.
Okay. We have 2 questions here that relate to the context price. One, Thomas Peterson just put in the chat. He's actually got 3 questions in. The other one came in, I believe, on Twitter from JNeeds14. So I'm going to read JNeeds' first, and then we'll get to Thomas's. But he says, if a bid is received in excess of the context price, will fractional owners of an asset have another opportunity to vote on the sale of the asset? So let's start with that.
Yeah. So the answer there is likely not, right? Is likely not. So again, we're taking the input essentially in advance, right? So we're going to be aggregating all the data, all of the shareholder wishes in advance, and then using that as a silent context price. So your feedback and your input is absolutely considered and absolutely aggregated in terms of creating that price.
All right. Then Thomas Peterson question. I'm gonna There's three of them. I'm going to put them on the screen here. Number one, how many people will know the context price? We'll go one at a time. How many people will know the context price?
Yeah, very, very, very few, right? So it's really just going to be Collectibles internal team and the consignor, right? So ultimately, consignors, by the way, don't have to put a context price, reserve price. Some people might just say, hey, whatever this process brings, and essentially I'll elect to sell it or not, right? So context prices are not a requirement, but it does offer another degree of seller protection there.
If the seller is a group of fractional owners on Collectable, do they vote on the context price? How will that work?
Yeah, so this goes back to the surveys, right? So we've actually already taken these surveys. So we have 3 shareholder assets that are going up in the first BWIC. All shareholders received communication this past week asking for, do you want to sell it? And at what price would you sell it? So Collectable now has all that information. And from that information, we'll prorate the results and use that as a context price.
Okay. So there's question 1. Question 2, who determines, okay, we've addressed who determines the context price. Number 3 is if a bid price is above the context price, will the asset transact at the bid price or the context price? The bid,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. So it'll be at the highest bid for sellers, right? So you could have, for ease of example, you could have a context price, reserve price of 100,000, just like an auction, right? Auction houses use a reserve price. Bids can definitely come in above that. And obviously, if you're selling an asset, you want to try to sell it for the highest price possible. So yeah, it'll sell ultimately if the seller wants it to sell. It'll sell likely at whatever the highest bid is.
Got it. Okay. Makes sense. Brendan Ryan says, oh dear God, more bureaucracy. But really, I mean, can you give a peek into the efficiency of the platform? Obviously, you had to employ some new technology so that you could run this. And when we think about it, you come from a financial background, so you're really taking something that's been working for a long time in that industry, being financial markets, and applying it here. Speak a bit to the efficiency of how you expect this to work.
Yeah, again, look, it's a very efficient process, right? 7 days, right? So 7 days. And again, I think when people see it, they'll realize how simple it actually is. Our job to take, what could be a difficult and sort of complex, sort of build out. I give our technology team a lot of credit. It's not easy to build. We built it. And I think people, once they see it, will realize exactly how simple and smooth it is. Again, 7-day process. People can submit one bid only to start. Top 3 individual bids advance. Then they get one more best and final bid. All the while, that's competing against a fractional bid. Whoever wins, wins.
Okay. All right. Makes sense to me. I mean, again, so many of these things are simplified by the platform that they're on. And so, if you have a good technology, if you have a good piece of software to run this, it should be I would expect it to run pretty smooth, and you seem pretty confident in that. So that's good to hear. This question kind of doesn't necessarily relate to this, but it came in on I'm not sure where, maybe Twitter, from Sports Card Stallion. Alex Bashan, I know who he is, says, is Collectable able to borrow against the assets that are offered to buyers or sellers of the collectibles?
We are not. We're not.
Simple as that. Okay. Nice to know. And then the last question came in on Twitter, and forgive me if this is repetitive, but I'm going to read it as it came. He says, I'm assuming there will be full disclosure of the context price agreed upon by all shareholders for the Mahomes National Treasures card, regardless of the outcome of the BWIC.
So we are not releasing that, actually, right? And because again, no context prices are being disclosed. Again, that facilitates more competitive bidding and sort of standardizes the process across every lot. So no, shareholders will not know exactly what the context price is, but it will absolutely be utilized to essentially sell an asset if it meets or exceeds shareholder wishes, in which case is the context price.
Got it. Okay. Jeffrey Hart piped in earlier, said, never heard of BWIC before, but love the concept. Collector's Dream is here with us. Here's a question from the Loud Collector. I'm going to read it as it comes and let you answer it. He says, let's say 10 people own a $100,000 card. If one of the 10 owners wants to buy out some other shareholders, can you give a shotgun deal to the rest of the group to increase his holdings?
Yeah, I mean, look, you're always able to do that on Collectable, by the way. You don't have to necessarily buy out every single shareholder. You can come and say essentially an out loud bid for X percentage of shares outstanding at whatever price you're willing to pay for. So this is always an option. In fact, we've had a couple people starting to ask about that when they're seeing, again, not securities advice, but they're starting to see that certain assets are trading well below recent auction comps, right? So if someone wants to essentially get a more meaningful stake in an asset that might be trading well below perhaps what it should, that's absolutely a possibility. I do expect that to potentially increase now that people know there's also a real catalyst in the rather near term for every asset on the platform.
Awesome. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about the fact that this press release had really, for me, three main components. The first one was the BWIC, this brand new offering sales method on Collectible, but it also mentioned that Collectible is moving into the world of non-sports cards and memorabilia. So things like non-sports cards, things like video games, TCG, trading cards games like Pokemon and that, comics, sports art. Speak a little bit to, how long have you wanted to move Collectible into these other sort of verticals of collectibles, and what expertise do you have in-house to curate and really to make sure that you know what you're doing? I mean, I feel like you, Ezra, and David Marino and the people that I know, the team at Collectible, you all, Brandon, I remember driving from Atlantic City to New York with Brandon talking sports cards and that. So it seems like you guys have some sports card knowledge. What are you doing to really supplement that within these other verticals?
Yeah. So, on the category expansion, we're pumped. This is something has always been on the roadmap, right? So if people could see sort of the Collectible roadmap dating back to 2020, it was really, hey, we're going to start with sports. We're going to learn how the fractional business works. There's a lot to the fractional business, regulatory, legal, accounting, you name it. It's there. So it's complicated enough to do. So we want to start with one category, kind of own that category. And then once we felt good about all the other processes, and we were going to expand to other verticals. So, we sort of exactly met our timeline. We always want to kind of branch off in other categories, Q1 of 2023. And obviously, we're in January of 2023. So the timeline is exactly met. As you mentioned, the first category expansion, I believe there's going to be others coming, more announcements to come shortly. Comics, we've got some amazing comic books. First cover Batman, first cover Superman, first cover Wonder Woman, et cetera. Really, premier assets within that category. We have graded video games. Again, I'm definitely not an expert in graded video games, but from what I hear, we have one lot in particular, which has been described to me for sports card collectors as essentially it's a 52 tops mantle and an 8, 7.5, and 7 all in one lot. Right. So that shows you kind of how cool some of the stuff we have is. So we have one of those. We have TCG. We're excited about that. Ravenous collector base in that market. So we're excited to expand. And we have a partnership with a pretty renowned sports artist named James Fiorentino. So we're excited to officially roll out his first painting on Collectible. So really, really excited, right? I mean, in terms of what gives us credibility in this category, it's really working with great partners, right? So one thing about Collectible, just through all the things we've done, the Mint Collective, Art Basel, you name it, shows like this, we do have a great network, and we've been looking at different ways to integrate some of those partners, who want to work with us, and we want to work with them more creatively. So this is really a great way to do it, to kind of rely on some top collectors, dealers, collections, auction houses, you name it, and to do it in a pretty meaningful way. So if we don't have the expertise in-house, we'll absolutely outsource it to people we trust, respect, and have a high degree of integrity.
Well, I can definitely speak to sports cards, but sports art I don't have much knowledge of. But you mentioned James Fiorentino. I had the I got to call it a privilege of meeting him and seeing his art. When was that? That must have been at the National last year, I think. The National in Atlantic City, and his art, absolutely blew my mind. It's unbelievably beautiful. So boy, oh boy, is that ever nice stuff.
Quick plug there. So the painting that's being offered in BWIC, it's a 1-of-1 Steph Curry watercolor rendering. So I was having a funny conversation. Actually, as part of this, I wound up interviewing a bunch of sort of category leaders and new categories that we are branching out into, and I interviewed James. And it was just interesting how he put it. He said, look, you can have, and again, not a perfect comparison, but I thought it was interesting how he put it. Essentially, you have numbered to 99 Steph Curry RPAs, right? Collectible sold one for, I think it was $760,000 back in, I think, it was probably last year. Obviously, those are trading still in the six figures, but you could have 99 of those, right? And those trade for six figures. This is a one-of-one signed Steph Curry watercolor rendition by arguably the most renowned sports artist of his time. James Fiorentino, by the way, cool little fact about James. He was the youngest, or still is the youngest, sports artist to ever be featured in the Baseball Hall of Fame. I think he got there when he was 15 years old. So he's been doing this for a long time. He's incredibly talented.
Yeah, I can vouch for that. He is. I was absolutely blown away. Okay, I want to go to a question here from Thomas Peterson that just came in. He says, can you further explain the consignor's role in the BWIC process? The consignor has turned the asset over to Collectible and may have kept some shares, thus becoming an investor like other investors. Then it goes on to say, why should the consignor know the context price but not the other investors? So I'll let you clarify all this.
Yeah, sure. So, for the first question, right? So, effectively, sorry, there we go. Okay. So the consignor is a consignor, just like he or she would be at any auction house, right? When you give an item over to any auction house, you're the consignor, right? The auction house's job is then to essentially put it up for competitive bidding, right? In a traditional auction format. The only real difference, I would say two big differences when you consign to Collectibles BWIC are the following, right? One is that arguably you have a much larger potential pool of buyers, because not just you have individual buyers, but you also now have groups of buyers, right? So you're potentially expanding the pool of people who could bid on your asset. You also have more flexibility, right? So you could essentially see what bids you come in for your asset and decide your best of course of action. You could sell the whole asset individually. You could sell part of the asset if the group bid, is competitive, or you can not sell it at all, right? There's no obligation to sell. Again, this is part of, sort of the process, right? Is giving sellers more optionality. It'll bring, other assets to the market that perhaps otherwise wouldn't, right? So, our view is that auction houses do a great job and have a lot of, amazing benefits. But I think Collectible can do something very unique, and that's, fractional, and that's retaining equity in assets. And, that's having a larger pool of buyers, both individual and fractional pooled investors, and ultimately giving sellers optionality that they might not otherwise have.
Okay. So did that address this question here too then? Why should the consignor know but not the other investors? I think you addressed that in that as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So here, so again, sellers don't have to give a reserve price, just like any consignor to an auction house. You can, if the auction house will allow it, you can use a reserve price. You don't have to, right? So same process here. You don't have to use a reserve price. You'll always have the option to not sell it, right? That's how the process goes. So, again, similar to, being consignor and using reserve at auction, as you are Collectible.
Got it. Okay. Let's go to Collector's Dream. Had this comment here. Glad to see them at Art Basel. What else are they doing to expand the sports card market? I just want to say before you answer this, I don't know any company that really is doing more than you guys with the Mint Collective and again, just trying to spread knowledge. You've been telling me since I met you, I guess it's already 2.5 years ago by now. And one of the first things you said to me is we want to share information, and we want to have a knowledge database, if you will, and really just help to grow the hobby. So I've always been impressed by that. But Collector's Dream might not be aware of what you've already done. But let's just say, what else are you guys doing? Unless I just mentioned everything.
Yeah, look, we've always tried to do things that, again, haven't been done before. Again, we have amazing relationships. There's a lot of amazing companies, auction houses, marketplaces, entrepreneurs, dealers, you name it. There's a lot of amazing people in this category. Collectibles always tried to do things differently, right? We always tried to kind of fill niches and voids where we thought the market could use it, right? So fractional is a perfect example, right? We've, essentially introduced the ability for anyone of any income bracket to own, grails, to own assets that otherwise would be completely, sort of out of reach, right? Or you wouldn't have access to other ways. Right. So we did that in fractional. Fractional By no means are we giving up on fractional. Fractional will be a massive, massive part of this. We're just creating additional ways that fractional can be applied.
Yeah.
Right. Here, right, BWIC, we think this is another terrific innovation. Again, this is bringing a new way for assets to potentially transact and for people to understand, sort of what their assets are worth, right? In a process that is tried and true, been doing this for decades, that transact billions and billions and billions of dollars a year. In fact, the amount of assets, the total value of the assets that transact in BWIC in the public markets probably exceeds that of the total, size of the sports card market in totality, right? So this is not a new process. It's not something we're inventing out of thin air. This is something that we just think really will work in the collectibles market. Again, we did Art Basel, which is really just sort of, our, kind of presenting sports cards and other collectible assets to fine art collectors. We invented the Mint Collective in partnership with IMG and Endeavor, which is sort of a first of its kind conference series. We do other live events, art, we've done cocktails and cards and a bunch of social events, content series with Jeremy, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, I mean, we're trying to kind of to expand the market as best as we can and to bring different innovations to different people and really just be part of what we think is a terrific category, terrific community, and really just help to grow it.
All right, cool. I just want to say to Brendan Ryan, I don't understand if your most recent comment is a question or if it's rhetorical. If it is a question, please reword it so I can understand it better. Ezra, the other thing that came in the press release was international expansion. The market will now be open to myself in Canada and people in other countries that are not the United States. It almost feels like this is a kill 2 or 3 birds with one stone sort of thing. Can you just speak to that? And why would I now, can I now get involved as a Canadian? And speak to that, please.
Yeah. So the answer to that is you can get involved in collectible, but not necessarily in fractional ownership yet. Right. So we will be opening up BWIC. Again, you have 2 ways to bid. You can bid as an individual or you can bid as part of a group. Individual bids are available to any collector or investor all across the world. So if you're in Canada, you can bid on an asset, just like you can bid on any other auction house for full asset ownership. We have not yet opened up international fractional participation. That's something that we're actually pretty close to doing in very select regions all across the world. Unfortunately, I think we've talked about this before. Canada happens to be one of the toughest regulatory environments or countries to actually crack, even though we're close in proximity. Apparently, our regulators don't see eye to eye on securities laws. So we'd love to be in Canada. Canada is absolutely one of the regions where we see the most kind of inbound interest. The 2 regions we'll probably open up first will be the UK and Australia. Those actually will probably be coming soon. So we're excited to do that. But again, to be clear, international bidders can bid on individual assets. They cannot yet participate in fractional.
Got it. Okay. And listen, as a Canadian, I'm not going to blame you for not being able to crack the Canadian code. I'll blame our regulators here. But at the same time,
I can assure you is that we've tried. We are trying.
I know.
And we've tried extensively. It's unfortunately, Canada is a tough market to crack.
Yeah, that's one of those things. It is what it is. And I know that their mission is to protect the investor, but sometimes it might go a little bit too far. I'd be willing to invest for sure on fractional if I was eligible to. All right, let's go to this question from DR. He says, Ezra, what, if anything, surprised you in 2022 during the environment that we just experienced, which did show the decreasing price movement in several sports cards within the, I'm paraphrasing, several sports cards within the market. Not every card went down in value, but many did.
It's funny. I'm not sure I've been surprised. I mean, in fact, I would say, if anything, I've been pleasantly surprised, right? I mean, I think if you had given me the macro environment that all of us are still experiencing, right? But certainly we experienced, in large part in 2022, everything you hear is inflation this, recession that. You see a massive decline across other asset classes. Look at real estate, look at gold. I mean, even things that people thought were sort of inflation proof went down considerably. Look at some of the blowups in cryptocurrencies, or in some of those coins, and markets being down as much as they were. I thought the sports card market actually did pretty well, right? Again, if you zoom out, a lot of cards, again, not every, and certainly a lot of cards are back down to sort of COVID levels or pre-COVID levels, but by and large, I thought the category actually did pretty well. In fact, there are areas of the market that were up. One I believe is hockey cards, right? Your sweet spot, right? So there are certainly areas of the market that I thought did exceptionally well. And obviously, you're still getting a lot of high-end transactions. I think, Q3, Q4 of 2022 brought some of the largest, most prominent sports collectible sales we've ever experienced, right? Including our Mickey Mantle first 8-figure sale in the market. I mean, one thing I would also note is, one thing about BWIC that we like is how curated it is, right? This is not something where we're going to do, 5,000 lots every week, right? I think that's one risk factor. One thing that I would like to see a little bit less of is fewer auctions, right? Less supply hitting the market, a little bit more curation, a little bit more thought behind it. I mean, you see a lot of these big cards that people thought were very rare, seem to come up pretty often at auction houses. And I think ultimately when something is not overly rare or perceived to be not overly rare, I think that in and of itself causes downward pressure. People would just say, hey, I can get a next auction, right? So if there's one thing that another thing I love about BWIC is how curated we're going to be, right? This is 25 lots, 25 iconic lots that we like, right? And we like for reasons that, I think a lot of other people will like as well.
Yeah, no, for sure. Okay. I'm going to follow up the question that DR asked about 2022. If you were just looking back on let's look forward into 2023. We're barely into it. Do you have any expectations of where the market's going to go? Any predictions, any speculation? What do you see happening in the sports card and collectible hobby as we make our way through 2023?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's gonna be an interesting year, right? I think it'll be a very interesting year. I mean, look, off the bat, we already got an announcement from Sotheby's that they're auctioning off a $5 to $7 million Kobe Bryant jersey. I think that's going to kick us off nicely. We've got the Mint Collective coming up, which I think will be a very interesting tell just in terms of sentiment around the hobby. Last year, the first one, it was everyone was very positive, very excited. I think some of that enthusiasm has waned a little bit, but everything I heard from the Dallas Card Show, I don't know if anyone was there who is here, but the intel that I received was things were moving. Your dealers making money. You had cards, really selling. High-end cards are really selling. So I think it'll be interesting, right? I mean, you have to consider everything on a relative basis, relative to other asset classes, relative to the liquidity profile of the world. To interest, I mean, I think it can't just be looked at as how the sports card market is doing. I think there's a lot of factors that are really intertwined. But look, I think it'll be an interesting year. I think a lot of companies doing a lot of great things, a lot of entrepreneurs really trying to move the market forward, a lot of money, a lot of, sort of talented people, a lot of capital has come into the space. I think things are still set up for success. I really do. And again, if you zoom out, not just over the last 6 months, last year, things, by and large look pretty good. Right. And so I think it just depends oftentimes on, kind of what time frame you're operating in. And, I also hear from collectors all the time, some people are thrilled the market has pulled back because that means that now they can get their hands on cards that were previously out of reach, right? So all a matter of perspective. Hobby has many different ways to, participate. And, I think there's always something for everyone, right? No matter what the macro environment is, no matter what the market does, there's always, sort of a lot of things that people can find to be interested in and get excited about in the hobby.
Yeah, I think the hobby's in a great place right now too. We've been through some adversity, but I think strength comes from adversity, and I think the hobby is a great example of that. A lot of the collectors that we gained during the epidemic are still with us, and a lot of them who might have thought this is crazy what's going on, and now they're seeing that things are starting to normalize again. I think volumes are strong still, a lot stronger than they were pre-pandemic. And I had similar intel out of Dallas that it was a great show. Vendors were happy. I'm really excited for the Burbank show coming up here in a couple of weeks in Ontario, California on Super Bowl weekend. So we'll have even more intel out of that show. You've got Culture Collision coming up in Atlanta at the end of this month. I unfortunately won't be there, but I can't wait to hear what comes out of there as well. So I'm excited about the year ahead. And I'm with you, the whole sentiment that prices have come down a little bit. Collectors can access more cards. That's kind of what it's all about, accessing cards and building our collection. So that's a good thing. Danny Black, my friend from Sports Vault Podcast, says, hello, guys. Great news for Collectible with BWIC. So that's very nice to hear. Hits and Chicks wants to say that Dave Marino is a legend.
He's a legend. Agreed.
He's a legend.
I agree with that.
He is a legend. And thank you, Hits and Chicks, for that comment down there. And then the Currency Project, who do really wonderful sports card art, say obviously they love the overlap between art and sports cards because they take sports cards and make art with them. What process, if any, is Collectable using to cross-educate collectors and investors from one market segment with the other? You've obviously done Art Basel, which is that the extent of it, or is there more?
Yeah, great question here, right? Yeah, so with Art Basel, certainly it was a great opportunity to really sort of cross-educate, fine art collectors, contemporary art collectors about collectibles, right? We had a lot of sports cards on display, other great assets, comic books as well at Art Basel. And, we thought that was a really worthwhile experience. The amount of people, we sort of did a double take when they first stopped by our booth. You're used to seeing all this contemporary art, fine art, and then you're kind of smacked in the face with sports cards. And it was interesting. At first, people weren't sure if these were art. And then ultimately, after a quick conversation, people were like, oh yeah, I get it. This is absolutely art. So I thought that was pretty cool. Collectible will also be sending out some content and some emails just on quick primers on other categories that we're going to be introducing. So again, that's comics, TCG, graded video games, etc., sports art. So yeah, if there's one thing Collectible always tries to do, hopefully we do a good job of it, is just to provide as much education, insights as we possibly can. One thing I would also I'd flag for people is when you go on Collectible, it's not just transactional. There's also a section on Collectible called Insights, and that's updated pretty frequently. I would argue, I'm obviously biased saying this, but I would argue that it's probably the best news feed of any collectible site I've seen, right? So anytime there's a major story in the collectibles market or, major market moving insights, immediately uploaded to Collectibles Insights. So even if you have no interest in BWIC or no interest in fractional, I would sign up for Collectible just to sort of keep abreast of market trends. So, always trying to educate, always trying to kind of get new people involved. One other thing I should add is part of the Mint Collective. There'll also be a real educational part as well. Like, I don't know if people were there last year, but people who were, they'll know that it was part card show, part, sort of transactional, and also part education. So we had panels and we had speakers, some of the leading minds of the industry kind of talking about, talking and educating all at the same time. So we'll be doing more of that. So if you're interested in kind of learning more, being educated in new markets, I would highly encourage you to come in Vegas in March.
Yeah, great answer. And for my perception, you guys do a great job of educating and just trying to grow the hobby overall. And Art Basel was a great initiative. We did a couple episodes talking about that earlier on with both eBay and a couple of people from your team who were there with boots on the ground. Thomas Peterson, back to BWIC for a moment, says, is the context price, which is also the reserve price, set solely by the share weighted input of the investors?
Yeah. So, I would say it is the biggest input by a long shot, right? We do this for every buyout offer. We as the asset manager ultimately have the final say, but the shareholder sentiment, shareholder surveys are the biggest input factor by a long shot. So your responses definitely mean a hell of a lot.
All right, and this is going to be the last one I bring up today because we are coming up to the end of the show. Brendan Ryan says, I'm trying to wrap my head around the benefits of fractional ownership, which seems like an oxymoron because it adds a layer of self-inflicted and complications the average collector doesn't need. I'm going to just say right off the bat that it's about accessibility. It allows people to buy into something that they otherwise can't afford. Not everybody can afford a $10 million Mickey Mantle 52 Topps card, but almost everybody can afford a $10 share. To me, it's obvious. I don't know what you're missing, Brendan Ryan, but Ezra, anything you'd like to add? Maybe I'm misinterpreting his comment.
Yeah, look, I think that's right. It's about accessibility and sort of ultimately a different way to transact, right? It gives sellers liquidity, it gives buyers optionality, and again, it allows accessibility for people who otherwise would not have it. Fully aware fractional might not be for everyone, and that's okay, right? Another great thing about BWIC is that it's not necessarily just a fractional platform, right? It doesn't necessarily just appeal to people who are interested in fractional ownership, right? These are assets that are available to any individual collector as well. Also, what I also say is, in partnership with eBay, we also have an eBay store. It's called Buy Collectable. We'll be taking in, I don't want to say low end, but lower end consignments and having more frequent cadence there as well. So I think if you watch Collectibles moves closely over the next couple months, you'll see different ways that we're engaging with the community. Obviously, fractionals are bread and butter. It's what we do exceptionally well. But there's also a lot of other ways that people can, sort of, I would say, meaningfully transact and to participate with Collectable.
All right. Awesome stuff. Well, I've enjoyed this. Thank you so much to Alex, Sports Card Stallion. Your question was answered earlier. Ezra, if you have any final words, in a moment will be the time. First, I'll let everybody know that next Sunday on Collectible Live, we will be taking a look at the assets that are in the first BWIC tranche. And that should be fun. We're going to have some guests come on and talk about these hopefully we'll get to touch on all 25 of these curated assets. We'll see if we are able to get to them all in the time allotment, but we'll do our best. Ezra, thanks for coming on. Final comments to you, and then we're going to wrap up.
Yeah, no, look, I think we're excited. One thing, obviously, Collectible tries to move the needle forward. We try to advance the hobby, try to grow the hobby in different ways. I think BWIC is that. Again, more liquidity and catalyst for shareholders, different ways to transact. We'll get new people into the ecosystem, open up international, open up different verticals. One other thing I'll also add about group bidding, which is a component of BWIC. I think we touched upon this briefly, but I just want to make sure that we sort of land the plane on this one. Is group bidding also applies to any asset on any other marketplace as well. So more to come there, but you could also participate in group bids on any asset, any marketplace. So we'll have more announcements there to come. But the first bids are next Sunday night, and we're excited about it.
All right, very good. And just Brendan Ryan, this comment here, my simple response to that is that each to their own. Not everybody operates the way you do, so your opinion is noted and it's valid, but it does not represent everybody else out there. All right, Ezra, thank you so much for joining. Hang tight right there for a moment, everybody. Thank you for joining. We will see you back here, Collectible Live, next Sunday, and that's it.